All right, let's dive in. We're going to talk about a place that doesn't just add a chapter to world history, it kind of forces you to rethink the entire book. We're talking about Ile-Ife, and for the Yoruba people, this wasn't just a city. It was and is the literal center of the entire universe. So, let's kick things off with a pretty big question. What if everything you've ever learned about the Garden of Eden was, well, a little off? What if the cradle of civilization wasn't in the Middle East at all, but deep in a West African rainforest? I want you to just picture that for a second. The very beginning of the world, happening right in the middle of what we now call Nigeria. That, right there, is the story of Ile-Ife.
Okay, so to really get why Ife is so important, we have to go back. I mean, way back to the beginning. And trust me, the Yoruba creation story is anything but boring.
It all starts with a being named Olodumare. You can think of Olodumare as the supreme being, the one who kicked the whole thing off. So Olodumare looks down at this massive primordial ocean and thinks, you know what this place needs? Some land. And just like that, a divine mission was afoot.
And you're gonna love how this went down. So Olodomare's first pick for the job, well, let's just say he got a little too into some palm wine and didn't quite make it. He got sidetracked. So his brother, Oduduwa, had to take over. He comes down from the sky on a chain, carrying a handful of earth. He drops it onto the water, and then, and this is my favorite part, he sets a five-toed chicken on it. This chicken just starts scratching away, spreading the dirt farther and farther, creating the land. And that exact spot, that became Ile-Ife, which literally translates to the place of spreading. How cool is that?
Now, this isn't just a cool story. It's the absolute bedrock of their politics. See, Oduduwa wasn't just some creator god who left the scene. No, he became the very first Uni, the very first king. And that myth created this incredible, unbroken divine line, connecting every single ruler of Ife, even today, all the way back to the moment the world was born. But Ife was so much more than just a place of myth. It was also this hub of incredible artistic and philosophical genius. Seriously, they created art that feels like it's alive, like it could just breathe. Okay, to really understand their art, you've got to wrap your head around this one core idea. The people of Ife believed that every single person has two heads. Yeah, two. First, there's your outer head. That's your physical face, what everyone sees. But the one that really matters is your inner head, the Ori Inu. That's your true self. It's your character, your destiny, your soul. And that is the key to their art. When you look at those unbelievably realistic bronze and terracotta heads from Ife, you're not just looking at a portrait. The artists were masters of something you could call perfected realism. They weren't trying to sculpt the outer head, they were trying to sculpt the inner head. They were capturing this perfectly calm, balanced, almost divine essence of a ruler, a vision of their perfected inner character, not just a snapshot of their face. So, fast forward to the early 20th century. European archaeologists dig these things up, and they are completely blown away. The craftsmanship is so sophisticated, so perfect, that they just couldn't believe they were made by Africans. It didn't fit their worldview. So what did they do? They invented a story. They said, oh, these must have been made by people from the lost city of Atlantis. But the real story, it's way more impressive. Nope, not Atlanteans. These masterpieces were created by guilds of incredibly talented Yoruba artists. These were people who had mastered metalworking techniques so complex that they were centuries ahead of many artisans in Europe. And this level of sophistication wasn't just in their art studios. It was literally part of the city itself. I mean, it was paved into the streets of this amazing medieval metropolis. Here's a great story that shows you what I mean. At one point, Ife was ruled by this powerful queen, Oniluo. And Queen Luo, well, she was very particular. She had a problem that, honestly, is kind of relatable. She absolutely hated getting her beautiful royal robes muddy when she walked around the city. But her solution was anything but ordinary. She didn't just ask for a few stepping stones. No. She ordered the city's main walkways and public courtyards to be paved with decorative pottery shards. Just think about that. They were laid out like these incredible mosaics. I mean, the sheer scale of that project tells you two things. One, the Oni had absolute power, and two, Ife must have had a massive pottery industry, churning out enough stuff to literally pave the city. So let's talk more about that power, because being the Oni of Ife, it wasn't just about having fancy clothes and paved streets. It was this immense, profound spiritual burden. See, the Oni wasn't just a ruler. He was seen as a living link to the gods, practically a god on earth. But that power came with a heavy, heavy price. According to their philosophy, the king was the land. They were one and the same. So if the king's spiritual health was off, if his inner head was unbalanced, the crops would fail, the rains would stop, the kingdom itself would suffer. He was cosmically on the hook for absolutely everything.
Now, as with any great empire, things change. Ife's reign as the top dog, politically and militarily, didn't last forever. By around the 15th century, other powerful kingdoms started to rise up, neighbors like Oyo and Benin, and they were military powerhouses. Oyo, for instance, had this incredible cavalry. In terms of pure muscle, Ife was starting to get overshadowed. And this is what makes Ife's story so unique. Even as its political power started to fade, its spiritual power never did. In fact, it became permanent. So you'd have these incredibly powerful kings from the Oyo Empire, right? But for them to be seen as legitimate rulers, they still had to get their blessing from Ife. It was always the Sacred Heart, the source, the original Garden of Eden for the Yoruba people. So yeah, it might have lost political clout, but it kept all of its spiritual authority. So why does all this matter today? Why should we care about a medieval African city? Well, because the story of Ife doesn't just add to our history books, it completely challenges the version of history most of us grew up with. Think about what Ife teaches us. It proves that incredibly sophisticated urban civilizations were thriving outside of the usual places we hear about, like Europe and Asia. It shows us that art can be philosophy you can actually hold in your hands. And that core idea of balancing your inner self, your inner head, that's a timeless pursuit, right? It challenges that old Eurocentric view of the world and just blows it wide open. So I'll leave you with this one last thought. The people of Ife truly, genuinely believed they lived at the center of the world, the exact spot where creation kicked off. And when you look at what they built, at the art they created, and the ideas they lived by, you kind of have to wonder, were they wrong?